That's it. All right. So in this chapter, we're talking about management, motivation, and leadership. So one of the things I think you guys are going to definitely learn, if you haven't already, is that there's some discussion about whether leaders are born or they're made and all of those things. And, no matter where you stand on that argument, I will tell you that there's probably widespread agreement, though, that the only way that you get experience managing others, motivating others, leading others is by actually doing it. So, and that comes with time. But there's some basic fundamental concepts in these areas that I think can help us all continually improve, because that's really what it is. It's a process. We get better and better at it as we do it. My first job right out of college, I was an entry-level financial analyst at a software company in Austin. And, after a year and a half or so, I was promoted to senior financial analyst and project manager. As a project manager, I was tasked with coordinating the activities of 7 different departments that were involved in creating each release of our quarterly software that our company created. And it was interesting because I was given responsibility to coordinate these 7 different departments, but no authority over these people. In other words, I was not their boss, yet I was still responsible for getting certain things done. So I had to learn very quickly that the only way I was going to be able to accomplish my job was to use some personal influencing skills. So I had to use, I had to adjust. Some of my other jobs where I was given some authority, even then, so I was given authority, meaning I actually, hired and fired people. I was responsible for their training and their evaluations and all those things. But don't you guys find that there is a difference between being a manager and being a leader? I think so, right? Because as a manager, you may be given formal authority over people, but it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to follow you and that they're going to be motivated to give their work their absolute best effort. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Hopefully you'll get some takeaways that will help you along that path. All right, so we'll talk about management and its importance. We'll talk about some of the key theories and practices of motivation, and then we'll get into the 4 parts of management: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Okay, so essentially this is what these are the different tasks of management. This is what management encompasses. And it's important because of the competitive nature of business, we have to do all of these things efficiently or we'll lose our competitive advantage. We've got to be able to organize all of our resources effectively and efficiently, or the company doesn't make money, we start to lose market share. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Let's start out talking about 3 different levels of management. Let's start at the top. In the top level of management, this is where we're setting the direction of the overall organization. This is where they articulate a vision, mission, values, and goals. They establish strategic goals for the organization. And this is also where they allocate resources, at least at a very broad level across the entire organization. And by resources, I'm talking about things like money, time, personnel, equipment, et cetera, all right? Then at middle management, oh, and by the way, some of the different job titles in top management are going to be things like president, or one of the many different types of vice presidents, or they could use different terminology. It could be like chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, also called C-level executives. All right, and then we've got middle management. In your notes, I would put right here, they manage the managers. That's what middle management does. So they are answering higher, and they're taking information from lower, and they're pushing information down. They're also coordinating side to side with their peers in other departments at their level of management. And then so their job titles are going to be things like director, regional manager, could be department manager. It depends on how the organization is organized, but understand that there's always levels of management above middle management and below middle management. Then at the first line level of management or supervisory management, there are no managers below them. So they are managing the day-to-day operations. They're managing the people that actually do the work of the organization. All right, so now that we cover the 3 levels of management, let's talk about the 3 basic managerial skill sets. The first one is technical skills. And what we mean by technical skills here isn't necessarily your ability to, install a hard drive or configure a computer network. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. We're talking about your expertise in your functional area. For example, if you are an accounting person, then accounting is your technical skill or your functional area. If you're a marketing person, then it's marketing. If you're a finance person, it's finance, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now, granted, if you are an IT person, then in fact, your technical skill are technical. All right. And then human skills. That's your ability to get work done with and through other people. It's your ability to do things like communicate. It's your ability to get along with people. It's your ability to motivate people. It's your ability to use your personal influencing skills to get people to maybe to follow you or to get along with each other. And then conceptual skills are those skills that allow you to understand the big picture of the organization. In other words, you're able to see, when you have conceptual skills, you understand all the different parts of the organization, and you understand how all of those parts work together. You also have a keen understanding of what's going on in the broader organizational environment. Remember when we talked about marketing, we had the marketing mix in the middle, right? Those are the things that that marketer could control: product, price, place, promotion, those things. But then remember, there was the outside of that wagon wheel. Those are the things that the marketer could not control, but had to have a good understanding of and be able to react to. Well, now we're getting into the conceptual skills of an organization. And so let's look at how you're going to use these different skills as you progress through the 3 different levels of management in your own career. All right, so when you first graduate, before you are a manager or when you are a brand new manager, All right, so before you even become a manager, primarily you are being hired. Let's say you get a job out of school, right after you graduate. The reason that you are being hired is overwhelmingly because of your technical skill. That's probably the main reason that you are being hired. And then as you move into management, that's the first line of management. That's primarily still your bread and butter. You are expected to be a technical expert in your field because you are managing people who do that function, perform that function. But you definitely still need to have some human skills, right? You've got to be able to get along with your employees. You've got to be able to interact with them, motivate them, communicate with them. You've got to be able to communicate with your boss. You may be needing to communicate with customers, suppliers, partners. Still a piece of, that's still part of what you're expected to do. And then perhaps you're not going to use as much conceptual skills at the very lowest level of management, but it's still going to be some. You see, conceptual skills allow you to make sense of your operating environment and make good decisions, even though you may not have specific information about that one item. That is, you can take a big picture look at your department or your team or your department or your division. And with that understanding about what's going on in your operating environment, you can make good decisions. Same with middle management. Notice how in middle management, look how much bigger the human skills piece of that is. The reason for that is you're still expected to have some technical expertise in your functional area, most likely, but now you're now into a level of management where you're not just a marketing person anymore, if that's the direction you came up, right? You may be managing people with a lot of different types of technical skills now. You might be managing some marketing people, some sales people, some accounting people, etc. Right? So the technical part of your job is a little bit smaller, but now you've got to use your human skills quite a bit more in order to get your work done. So you'll be communicating with people below you. You'll be doing a lot of coordination with people at your same level of management. In other words, your peers in management. And you'll be taking direction from higher as well as pushing information up to higher. So you're communicating up, down, and sideways, and you've got a lot more responsibility now to get people, to motivate people. And so that's going to be a bigger and bigger piece of your toolkit. Now, as you move into top management though, look what the largest one is now, conceptual. Now, all of those things and outside of that wagon wheel we covered in marketing, understanding what your competitors are doing, understanding the rules, regulations, laws that govern your work. Maybe it's understanding the industry, understanding and knowing what your competitors are doing, knowing which way technology might be moving. And you're going to use all of that information, all of that study to make big picture strategic plans for the organization. And then along with those plans, you're going to start allocating resources so the work can actually start getting done. All right, so it's important then, if we're going to really look at how to motivate people, is to understand some of the underlying theories that got us there. If you've never heard of Abraham Maslow, this is not going to be the last time you hear about Maslow. In fact, depending on your major, you might hear about Maslow quite a bit more. Give you a reference in time. Maslow came up with the hierarchy of needs theory in 1943. Um, Essentially, the hierarchy of needs, the hierarchy of needs states that all human beings have 5 basic categories of needs, and that they won't be motivated to achieve the next higher level of need until they satisfy lower level needs first. In other words, they have, in order to be motivated to satisfy their safety needs, they have to satisfy their physiological needs first. Okay, so what I want you to think about as you read through these is I want you to think about how you can use this information as a manager to motivate people towards self-actualization, towards, putting their absolute best foot forward in everything they do. All right, so to get us there, hopefully by the time they get to you, their physiological needs have been met. But if all people have a need for security, of safety of some kind, right? Having a job is a big piece of it. So if you want your people to be motivated to the next higher level, you need to make them feel secure in their employment. Of course, that probably means don't make people, don't threaten people with being fired all the time. That's probably not the best way to motivate people. I'm not saying it can't ever be part of what you have to do to get people to do what they're supposed to do, but hopefully that's a last resort. People should feel pretty secure in their employment. Look at also health. People, that's a big part of safety. And that's something that you can do as a leader to motivate people, is to look out for their well-being. And then look at the next one, belonging. That if you want your employees to be motivated, one thing that's helpful then is to help them feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves, that they're part of something special, it's part of something good. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Anything that you can do to build a good team, positive team environment. It could be opportunities to give back to the local community. It could be setting challenging but achievable goals. That makes people feel great when they achieve them, like they work together as a team towards a common goal and they achieve them, and then you keep on raising the bar. That makes people feel like they're a part of something special. Moving on into esteem is probably you can probably see the easiest translation of practical skills. Motivating people to esteem, making people feel good about themselves, building their confidence. That could be something as simple as, wow, you know what, Rosa, you knocked that project out of the park. Great job on that, right? You recognized her hard work and you made her feel good about it. And maybe you even do it again during a team meeting so that you're doing it in front of her peers also. Now she feels especially good about it, right? Building your employees' confidence. How can you motivate by building someone's confidence? There's a lot of ways that you can build your employees' confidence. For one, try to set your people up for success. Give them the resources as best you can. As a manager, give them the resources they need so that they can be successful. That is, maybe give them sufficient time, budget, personnel or equipment or software or tools or whatever it may be. Try to set them up for success. Now understand, as a manager, sometimes you're going to have to get more done with less. Just comes with the job. But trying to set people up for success. Another piece of that, of building confidence, is making sure that people also have the training that they need to do a good job. Give people a feeling of achievement. Could be promotions, raises, spot bonuses. It could be a wide variety of things. Employee of the quarter, all kinds of programs that you can do, use to make people feel good about themselves. Show people respect. One way to do that, by the way, if you need to get on to one of your employees, sometimes, sometimes your employees need a kick in the pants. Sometimes we probably all do. But you never want to make corrections on an employee in front of other people. You always want to do that in private. So you want to recognize people for good things publicly, and you want to give them ways to improve privately. All right, and then look at self-actualization. That's when we're motivating our employees to be all that they can be. Now, at this level of development, hopefully this is where employees aren't so much motivated anymore by extrinsic rewards like recognition or promotion or more money. This is where people are like, you know what? I just want to be the best version of myself I can be. I want to be able to utilize the gifts that I was given to make a difference. So those are some of the basic needs all humans have. So as a manager, understanding these needs can often help us motivate our employees. All right, so one of Maslow's students, Douglas McGregor, in 1960, he came out with theory X and theory Y. Essentially, that is a theory that essentially states that your ability to motivate your employees has a lot to do with how you view your employees. For example, take a look at this slide. Theory X managers. These, have you ever had one of these managers? I hope not too many, right? These are the managers that think that they're trying to catch people doing something wrong. That's their motivation. They gotcha. They're the ones that typically, they tend to micromanage people a lot. They tend to, check on every 5 seconds and question every single move you make instead of doing what theory Y managers typically do, which is, they assume, they look for the best in people. Quite often, if we look for the best in people, that's often what we find. Also, if we look for the best in people, whether we realize it or not, it has a tendency to change the way we treat those people. There was I don't remember where I heard this story, but there was a story about a brand new professor who took over a particular class, and the professor that was introducing this professor to his class told him on the side, hey, by the way, this is one of the gifted classes. These are the gifted students that are especially smart, especially bright. So you're in for a treat teaching this particular set of students. So sure enough, that professor started teaching these students and found that they were especially bright, and these students really seemed motivated to learn and just asked the best questions and were just such a delight to teach. And at the end of the semester, during an employee meeting, this professor was bragging about his students and mentioning how grateful he was for getting the gifted set of students. And one of the other professors said, what are you talking about? The gifted program was ended at this school years ago. They were just regular students. My point is this: a lot of times what we look for is what we find. And I think it has a big impact on how we treat our employees. All right. So I would assume that your employees want responsibility and that they want to do a good job. Now, is that the simple answer? Is it as simple as saying, oh, well, that's it? You just look for the best in people and everything will be hunky-dory? Obviously, that's not the case. We wish it were. We know that there are indeed some people that do screw off, that are looking to do as little as possible, that don't want responsibility. But hopefully, as you get into the professional world, hopefully more and more of these people have been weeded out during the selection and hiring process. All right. Oh, by the way, before I forget, in your book, there is an error. And pardon me, I'm going to turn this light on real quick. I can't see anymore. All right. In your book, Exhibit 13.1, there is an error. The book mixes up the order of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Essentially, safety and esteem should be flipped. They're wrong in the book. What you see in front of you right now on this screen, that is the correct order, just so you know. All right, don't want you to mess up on the test because that error in the book. All right, so some other theories came out of McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. One of them is this idea of job enrichment. It states that the way that we design jobs for our employees has a lot to do with how motivated they are and how motivated they can stay. For example, skill variety. If you create jobs that allow your employees to use a variety of different skills that they have, it's going to make the work more challenging for them. They'll be able to use more creativity. It'll be more motivating. Now, you can't always do that. Understand a lot of times the jobs have been created before you ever get to the company. And you're just managing people who are in those jobs. I get that. But you can do some things to kind of mix things up sometimes. Maybe have your employees cross-train, help each other out instead of you doing what you normally do every day in and day out. For a couple of weeks, I'm going to have you work with so-and-so, and I want them to train you in what they do. That also has a lot of other great side benefits too, as you might imagine, right? If you have a good appreciation for what your fellow employees do, that helps with team building. If you have the ability and understanding of how to do their work, you can help them a lot more readily. Also aids in that team building. Another thing that you can do when possible is give your employees a clear beginning and end to the tasks that you ask them to do. Let them see a bigger piece of a particular job. In other words, one way to look at this is like someone that is on an automobile assembly line, right? Can you imagine if you went to work every day and you just did one little job all day long? You wouldn't feel like you're really building a car. You would just feel like, I rivet that one panel. That's what I do. Ugh, that would be soul crushing, wouldn't it? Well, think about that. Even with your lowest level employees, it'll be soul crushing to have them do the same mundane tasks all day. Try to mix things up. Try to give them a bigger piece of a total task so that they get that feeling of accomplishment. Task significance is also a big piece of this job enrichment thing. What we mean here is make sure your employees understand how the work that they do has an impact on others. It could be on customers, on their peers, on the department, on the company at large, make sure they understand why what they do is important. That importance is very motivating for a lot of people. And then autonomy is also a big piece of this. Don't try best you can not to micromanage your people. I know a lot of young managers tend to be so concerned about all of their employees doing a great job that they micromanage them. That's soul crushing for your employees. It's also not a good way to build their confidence, self-esteem. It's also somewhat disrespectful. So where possible, instead, give your employees, describe what success looks like when you give them a task. I need you to build a database that will track this, 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 and this for the entire department. Can you get that done by Friday at 11 a.m.? Great. Well, I tell you what, let's touch base with each other on Tuesday afternoon before you leave for the day. All right. So you're not completely taking your hands off the reins completely, but you've described what you want them to do, at least what the desired end state should do, whatever it is you're asking them to do. And then you let them surprise you with how creatively they can get it done. Let them use their own creativity and some initiative. They might surprise you with how awesomely they do things in ways that you might not even have thought of. But as a manager, remember that you are still responsible for the work that gets done in your department. Therefore, you can't just completely take your hands off the reins. One of the ways that you might do it in a positive way is saying, and let's touch base, between now and the time it's due, and just see if we can put our heads together, make sure we're both on the same sheet of music, and see if we can together come up with any further improvements to the great work I know you're going to do. All right. And then feedback. Make sure you're giving your employees feedback. People love to hear that they're doing a great job. And if they can do a job better, let them know and be specific. Don't just say, do better work. Exactly how. One of the things that I started doing years ago is whenever I want to give someone ideas for ways to improve their performance, I always start off with a positive, what they are doing well already. And then I phrase it just like that. To do even better, how about if we do this and this? And then ask for their input and how they think they could improve. And then again, I end with something really positive on the end. So something positive, the improvement, including their input, their ideas, and then something positive on the tail end of it. A great habit to get into as a manager. All right, then there's expectancy theory. Expectancy theory essentially states that workers will be motivated if they believe that a certain amount of effort will result in a certain level of performance, and that certain level of performance will result in a certain level of reward. But here's the thing, if any of the three parts of the theory fall short, the employee will be demotivated. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say that you've got an employee that tries really, really hard. Their thought process is, if I try really, really hard to do a good job, I will do a good job. And if I do a really good job, I'll get rewarded in some way. I'll get an attaboy, or I'll get a bonus or a raise, or I'll get to leave early on Friday, whatever the case may be. But what if that employee tries really, really hard and it does not result in good performance? They could be demotivated. So what can you do as a manager? Well, I would look in the mirror and try to make sure that I have set them up for success. Did I give them enough time and other resources, a big enough budget, enough personnel, the right equipment, the right tools, right? If not, enough training. And if I didn't, well, that's something that I can do to help get them back on track. But it could also be a different portion of these three items. Let's say that you've got an employee who does, one of those annoying people that doesn't have to try very hard to do a really good job, right? Well, if they're not trying very hard and they still do great work and they are still rewarded, eventually they're going to stop trying as hard. Accordingly too, though, if somebody doesn't try very hard, don't perform very well, yet they are still told that they're doing an awesome job, they're still getting recognition or a positive reward, eventually they're going to stop being so motivated to, their motivation is going to go down even further and their performance will come down. So it's got to be an equal balance. It's got to balance. All right. And then equity theory. Equity theory holds that, and by the way, expectancy theory, write in your notes, that's Victor Vroom. Sounds like something from Harry Potter. 1964, Victor Vroom, like a broom, but with a V. All right. So equity theory holds that people will be motivated if they feel like, if they perceive that processes and procedures around them that affect them are fair and equitable. And when they're not, it's very demotivating for those people. And I use the word perception very purposefully here because quite often people just don't understand the process. Maybe it turns out it really is fair. Well, that's where you come in. You've got two things you need to do here as manager. You need to try to make the processes and procedures actually fair. Take out as much subjectivity as you can, make things as objective as possible. For example, quite often when it comes to promotions, can you imagine if you were asked as a manager, I want you to rank all 10 of your employees. I want you to give them all a numerical score between 1 and 100 for the entire previous year. Ready, go. Would that be difficult? Might there also be quite a bit of bias? Because you're probably closer to some of those people than others, or like some of those people more than others, or around some of those people more than others. It would be really difficult. So quite often we use rubrics of some kind when we do employee evaluation, because it's a list of different evaluation items with a detailed description of what that item is. And then there's a score range, like maybe 1 to 5 within that range, you need to score that employee. That forces you to walk through a number of criteria for each employee. And then you simply tabulate all the scores for all of those items. And that's going to be a lot more objective view of that employee's performance than simply trying to throw out a number based on your own memory. Okay, so that's step one. Try to make things as objective, take out as much of your personal bias as possible, make processes fair. And then secondly, communicate the process. You've got to tell your employees, explain the process to your employees so that they accept the fact that it is fair. In fact, the cool thing about doing both of those steps is that most of the time, even when a decision doesn't go the way that an employee would prefer it to, as long as they feel like the process was fair and it was communicated to them, they will typically be okay with it. So something to keep in mind going forward. All right, so at the turn of the century, management has really changed over the last century. At the turn of the last century, it was all about specialization of labor. There was even a thought process that if you just pay people more money, they'll be more motivated. Turns out that's not really the case. But it's probably can be boiled down to something different than you might think. So instead of trying to focus on making your employees happy, I don't recommend that. The thought process is that what you might do to make your employee happy, if that's your motivation, might not be good for the company. It would make me tickled to death if MCC would quadruple my salary and only make me work every other year. Sure, that'd be awesome. But you know what? Turns out, if you focus instead on making your employees productive and getting them engaged, getting them excited about their work, motivating them to their fullest potential, it turns out that is a much deeper level of happiness. So focus on making your people productive and engaged. Happiness will follow. All right. Also, make sure that you're looking out for your employees. Make sure that you're looking out for them. Sometimes your employees can get so motivated, so into their work that sometimes they neglect other parts of their lives. So if we're trying to make your employees productive and engaged, sometimes it involves you kicking them out the door. Hey, you've been here for, I know you've been here for 12 hours today. Go home, enjoy your weekend, go spend time with your friends and family, go do whatever it is that you do to recharge. Because a lot of times, if you can do that, look out for employees even when they're not looking out for themselves, they'll be actually more productive when they come back to work. And people have problems getting them the resources that they need when they have problems. There's a wide variety of things that you can do to genuinely show care for your employees. One way to do that is through sabbaticals. In fact, a lot of you may know Professor Tommy Lawrence. He was on sabbatical this time last year and last summer. That was a reward for being an awesome member of MCC's faculty for a number of years. The sabbatical was to allow him to finish up his PhD. So that was I'm sure that was greatly appreciated by Tommy and motivating for him. And there's also a wide variety of non-traditional benefits. Of course, there's health benefits and paid time off and those sorts of things. But there's also a wide variety of things that non-traditional benefits that you can give your employees that just shows that you care about them. It could be company parties. It could be sponsoring a company softball league. It could be providing opportunities to serve the local community, to give back. All of those things can be are just ideas. Use your imagination. All right, so let's talk about the 4 different management functions. Remember, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. So let's talk about each of those and we'll finish up with these for today. All right, so planning, think of planning is where we're going as a company or as a division or as a department or as a team, whatever the case may be, whoever you're in charge of. This is where we're going, and this is how we are going to get there. That's what planning is supposed to do. All right, so remember those 3 different levels of leadership? Kind of think about those. Let's overlay those as we go through these different levels of planning. So strategic planning is that planning at a very high level, very long-term, typically performed by senior leaders in the organization. That's where you're setting the mission, the vision, the values, and the goals, the key 3 to 5 strategic goals for the entire organization. It also sets the stage for how resources are allocated, because you're figuring out what the priorities of the company should be going 3 to 5 years out. So the next level is tactical planning. Typically taken on, middle managers are going to take the key strategic goals given to them by their higher ups, by the senior leaders, and then it's going to be up to middle management to make those things happen, right? So they will translate each of the strategic goals into one or more tactical level or medium term objectives to make those things happen. So they're going to apply those to each of the specific functional areas of the organization, whoever they are in charge of. All right, and then at the operational level, right, that's where we're making our short-term plans. These are often your individual tasks that are done on a daily or a weekly or a monthly kind of a time frame. So each of these have to flow with the one above. So for each strategic goal, you may have one or more tactical plans that start to flesh those things out and make them a reality, all the way down to the operational level where it's like, Dave, this week you are going to do this and this and this. That supports this tactical level plan of this, and that supports the strategic goal of that. Now, understand, it's not always going to be that neat and tidy. But my point is, all of your plans at these different levels should nest or support the next higher level of planning within the company. The thought process is that if everyone at the operational planning or at the operational level are executing nested plans, then the entire organization will in fact be moving towards the proper strategic direction that the senior leader set out. All right. There's also something called contingency planning. That's when you're planning for the unexpected. There's a wide variety of different types of contingency plans, but essentially you're planning for what could go wrong. So you're coming up with different scenarios, making certain assumptions, both inside the business and in the outside environment, and you're developing possible courses of action, responses. So some of these issues would be things like, how are we going to respond if our competitors, really knock out our best product by creating something that's even better? What do we do if the government regulates our industry? Or what are we going to do if there's a natural disaster of some kind? How are we going to continue operations? There's a wide variety of contingencies that you can plan for. All right. So another piece of that strategic planning process, and we're just gonna just dice this up just a little bit. The mission of the organization. Why do we exist? What are the things that we value? What are our core goals or strategic goals? Most companies have 3 to 5 strategic goals, a handful of values, and they have a purpose. They may have a mission and a mission statement and a vision statement, or they could just kind of be combined into one type of mission vision statement. Different ways to do it, but it provides a framework, like an umbrella for all of the other plans. Part of that is figuring out the operating environment that you are operating in. So one way to kind of start nailing this down is by doing a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis is something you do to understand your internal strengths and weaknesses, as in things that you can control, as well as external opportunities in the marketplace and threats in the operating environment that you need to take actions to mitigate in some way. So let's talk about strategic goals. So often, by the way, what will come out of your SWOT are your SWOT, the results will help you determine quite often what your strategic goals, your main 3 to 5 high-level goals, long-term goals should be. And there are certain ways to write these, by the way. Now, they need to be specific. They need to be measurable, because if they're not, I mean, if they weren't specific, it'd be something like somebody telling you, do a better job. Okay, what does that mean? Right? Your company has to know the same thing. Be specific so that people understand what it is they need to execute, and then make sure that they're measurable. If you can't measure a goal, you have to ask yourself, is it worth doing? Because how do I know if I'm doing it or not if I'm not measuring it, or I can't measure it? It's got to be time bound. I'm going to give you an example of one altogether. It's got to be realistic, but it's got to be challenging. If you don't push the envelope, the company can stagnate. So implement, you're going to, this could be something like, we are going to become the #1 provider in blah, 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 whatever it is your company does, by 2024. And we are going to be, or we're going to reach a certain level of revenue by by December 31st, 2024. Whatever level of revenue you set, obviously needs to be challenging. Now, whatever you come up with for your strategic goals, you're going to implement those with the next lower level of planning. So make sure that as you do this, you're going to have a series of regular meetings where you're going to review your progress and see how well you are doing. And if you are not making progress, you're going to figure out how to do so. I could teach it a whole semester, just strategic planning. But let's move on. So organizing is where we're figuring out how to organize the work that we do. Organizing, for example, divisions of a company or departments within a company, deciding how centralized or flat the reporting relationship should be within the organization. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. It used to be that most organizations traditionally were kind of shaped like, if you look at an organizational chart, the boss at the very, very top, and then you've got several people. Well, let me just show you. right? So it used to be that these organization charts were kind of shaped like a Christmas tree because there were so many different levels of management. And there's some problems with focusing or centralizing power into the hands of a very few number of people. Highly centralized structure hogged the power. Um, the good thing about a highly centralized structure is that it's easy to keep control. You've got people, a small number of people, so it's easier to keep a tight rein on the decisions that are being made. But on the negative side, it's slow. Imagine it if you're at the very bottom of one of these organizational charts that was very, very centralized. And you just have a simple request, but you've got to get a signature from this manager who has to get a signature from this manager and this manager and this. And by the time you get signatures approved all the way into the hands of the final, level of management that is needed, you might not even need it anymore. The opportunity may have already passed the company by. So the level of centralization is part of that organization decision-making process. More and more companies are going to flatter structures that give people decision-making authority at the lowest level possible. That provides for a very agile business. It allows you to make decisions very quickly, to react to changes in the market much quicker. And by the way, think back to some of those things we talked about how to motivate people, giving people autonomy, right? Giving people the ability to make decisions. Now, one of the things I want to make sure you understand and you put in your notes under the decentralized type of structure is that if you're going to utilize a flatter organizational structure, that means that you have to provide a lot of training to your employees at those lower levels so that the company will be confident that they will make good decisions if you're giving them the authority to do so, okay? Span of control essentially means the total number of people that you supervise. So don't get, you may have heard of direct reports. That's something a little bit differently. We're talking about the total number of people that you are in charge of. You may have several different layers of management below you, but all of the people below you, if you are the boss of these 4 people and those 4 people are the boss of a bunch of more people, your span of control is all of those people. Does that make sense? That's your span of control. All right. And I think you understand departmentalization, putting people into groups that make sense based on either their functional area, based on their product, could be based on the type of customer, could be based on geography, et cetera. For example, my little brother told you about that works at Apple. He works on a sales team that is in charge of, so sales is the functional area. They work with iPads and MacBooks. That's the product categories. Their customer is the government market, specifically the educational market, specifically K through 12. Their geographic territory that they work in is California and Hawaii. Yeah, it's tough, right? Someone's got to do it. All right, so lots of ways to departmentalize based on how based on the organization's work and their own needs. All right, So let's take a look at some different models. I think a line organization is something that we're all familiar with. That's when we have a clear, simple chain of command. That means you report to me and I report to her and she reports to her and she reports to, et cetera, et cetera. When you can draw those clear lines of reporting relationships. It's a line organization. A line and staff organization is when you've got that line organization plus you have certain positions where they report directly to the top. Let me show you a picture of what that can look like. So let's take well, this is too small to really make sense of it, but this would be an example of a line and staff. So if all of these people, you can see the reporting relationship if these are individual people, right? This person reports to this person or this team reports to that, you know, et cetera, all the way up. And then at some point within the organization, you've also got staff positions. So these are all line positions down here doing the actual work of, you know, selling the products or making the products that the company makes or selling the products that the company makes. At some level of the organization, you've also got staff that isn't involved in those day-to-day types of things. In other words, they will report directly to senior management. For example, at MCC, we're organized into departments based on functional area. Like there is a business department. If you looked at the line and staff part of that structure, I report to a division head. Division head reports to department head. Department head reports to several different layers up, all the way to the president. And then the president of the college also has a staff like legal, HR. Those would be part of staff. Does that make sense? So that is a line and staff organization. Most companies are organized as a line and staff. All right, and then a matrix organization, that's where it gets messy. And essentially, it's a type of organization within an organization. It's just really another way to look at all of the different skills and abilities that different members of the entire organization may have. For example, you may have a line and staff organization, and that's the way that you operate day to day. But for specific projects, you may need temporary use of people with different key skills from different parts of the organization. So if you were to overlay a matrix organization over that line and staff, it would allow you to temporarily grab the skills and abilities you have from different parts of the organization in order to get specific work done. And then when it's over, people go back to their group and stay there. So one of the companies I worked at, we were considered, we were line and staff, but we also had a matrix organization. I was in charge of we were primarily a technology company, but I was in charge of managing the non-technical resources that we had as a company. Like I had psychologists in my lane of the matrix. I had psychologists, I had technical writers, I had proposal writers, I had a lot of different people with very specialized skills. So if somebody was working on a non-technical project, they could come to me and say, hey, Steve, do we have anyone who is an expert at blah? I could say, yes, we do. That is Dave Johnson. He works on the so-and-so team. What do you got? What do you need? What do you got going? And then I would make the coordination to see if we couldn't get him on loan, at least some, to help out with this other project. Make sense? Okay. It's also a good way to do some forward thinking about planning and permanent reorganization of your lineman staff. All right, let's talk about some of the different leadership styles. Now we're into leading. All right, so we did some planning, we did some organizing, now we're going to lead. Understand that it's not enough to simply be given authority. In order to get people to follow us is often quite another story. So there's some different, you're going to have to figure out what is the best way to use your own skills and abilities, what works best for you. So here are some basic categories of leadership. One is the autocratic. Autocratic leaders, they really hoard the decision-making for themselves. They issue orders without consulting their subordinates. And that sounds terrible, but you know what? Sometimes that is actually, there's a time and a place for all of these leadership styles. Sometimes that makes sense. For example, when a quick decision is needed, you don't always have time to form a committee and ask opinions of a whole bunch of different people. Sometimes you're going to have to just go, you know what, this is what we're going to do. That's the decision. All right. Maybe it's a safety issue. Maybe when an employee is brand new. When a customer needs absolute consistency in their product or service delivery, that's a good time for autocratic leadership. And then democratic leadership. That's probably going to be your bread and butter most of the time, right? That's where you're going to share power with your followers to some extent. Even though you are going to make the final decision, you're still in charge. You still make the final decision, but that means that when possible, you're going to ask for input from your subordinates, because a lot of times they're in the trenches. They may know about certain things better than you, because maybe you're at that middle management level where you're managing all kinds of different teams. So if you need specific information in one area, go to the people that do it day in and day out. Solicit their input, and then you make the call. Most of the time, that's probably going to be the way to go. Typically, this is going to give your customers a really good balance of consistency and flexibility. Consistency and flexibility. All right, and then sometimes there is a time for free rein leadership. That's when you set objectives for your followers, and then you really kind of take your hands off of the reins and let them get it done. Now, this could be appropriate when you have really highly skilled specialists or consultants, or when a situation requires absolute maximum creativity. That's when free rein leadership may be appropriate. All right, and then lastly, controlling. Controlling has a negative connotation. I think, hey, you're trying to control me. All right, here's what we mean in the management sense of controlling, though. Controlling is about monitoring performance. So you're essentially you're establishing standards of performance, maybe specifications for performance or for a product or for service delivery, and then you're monitoring actual performance, and where it falls short of the standard, you take appropriate action to correct that action. In other words, you control the activity. So it's also a great way to make, to think about it is you're making improvements where necessary, where either you're finding a problem or as a way to make improvements. The basic steps are this: set performance standards, measure actual performance against the standards, and then take corrective action when it is needed. As an example, let's say that you are managing a production line and you're producing some sort of product that has certain specifications. It's supposed to be this size, this shape, it's supposed to operate at this this heat level, it should last this long, it should handle this much voltage, whatever the case may be. So maybe as part of your quality control process, you periodically spot check some of the products, you take them off the line and you test them. And if they don't meet specifications, you analyze the problem, figure out what's wrong, and then go to the part of the assembly process where that should have been done and investigate, see what went wrong. It could be that an employee is doing it wrong. So the corrective action you take is to train them how to do it correctly. It could be that one of the tools they use to tighten whatever is broken and it's not calibrated properly. So the corrective action in that case would be to recalibrate the tool. And that would bring the process back into spec. So that's what controlling means. All right, so that's all I got for tonight. You guys have any questions, thoughts? All right.
I don't.
All right, well, thanks for being here, gang. And it's great seeing you guys. And see you next week. So 14, 15, and 17 is what we got for the next test. Don't forget to take test 3. No sad stories on Monday, right? Make sure that take test 3.
Okay.
All right. Have a great night, guys. See you next time.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.